right. Hello, 14ers. Welcome back to Ministry Revealed. It is November 7th, 2019. Guys, I pray you're ready. We are going to have a ride today. I'm in my cold garage. I can still see my breath. 10:45 in the morning, but I cannot wait. This started a little bit a couple days ago, and then yesterday it just everything started coming. I got this whole thing done for you guys here. See all this? And it started with this stuff here, which I'm not going to get into with you yet. It's it's so awesome. And then you guys who are sharing, we talk about it all the time. You guys who are sharing got our website here that you can access from YouTube, and you go to the forum, and so many of you guys are sharing. It's, who said it? Shoot, what's his name? It just slips my mind. One of our brothers here, he posted a comment in the last video, and he says, it's all happening in the forum. The forum is where it's at. That's what he said. And, he's a relatively new brother as well, and he's saying the same thing as so many of you guys are saying. Once you start to see this stuff and the understanding starts coming, you can't unsee this stuff. It's so crazy good. It is so accurate. It is so biblical from beginning to end, from Greek and Hebrew. Well, today is no different. And today, I know the videos are coming out a little bit sooner than they had, but I just couldn't sit on this one anymore. With what some of you guys have been sharing with me, things just to check out. One of our sisters, what's her name? Elise. Elise was sharing. I told her to resend me some information that she was telling me to look at regarding trumpets and Christ's birth. All right? Very important if we're trying to figure out this start time calculation. Why? Because Luke chapter 2, right? Luke chapter 2. We know Jesus is born. He gets circumcised. From the circumcision, there's another 33 days for his mother in her uncleanness. So you got the 40, but they don't go to the temple to Simeon until the 41st day. All right? Until she had accomplished. Then they can go to the temple. We've talked about this many times. And then Simeon. And Simeon is our guy. He is our guy. Sorry, I'm warming up my hand at the same time. He's our guy for the wording that's to the bride. All right? That he wouldn't see death. All right? We get that from Luke 9:28 or 27. That some of you shall not see death till you see the kingdom of God. Simeon was told by the Holy Spirit that he would not taste of death, that he would not see death until he saw the Lord's Christ. And then we go to Acts 15, and in Acts 15, it tells us by James that Simeon said how God would take out a people from among the Gentiles for himself, as it was written by the prophet. So he's confirming this time frame of Simeon. And guys, we know, what do we know more than anything now? Well, there's a number of things that we know more than anything. But we know the truth. Israel is truly 70. We know it must happen. There's only between now and early March. Wait till you see this. Now, let me clarify, because this video is going to be based not on Jesus having born at Tabernacles, and then the 8th day that he fulfilled being, the 8th day with his circumcision being here. This is what I believed it was. Okay? So we still maybe have that in the background, which brings us to a potential escape day of November 24th. So remember, even though we're talking about escape, this is only a piece. We're going to be unraveling and giving you guys helpful things to show to people. to be able to talk to people about it and show where the scriptures are as well. All right. It's going to tie into something we've been talking about recently, which is the time of the Mayan calendar. And that is something that when our brother Stainless Sea shared it, Sean, when he shared it this morning, I went and looked at it. It was like an hour ago. And I looked at it here like half an hour ago. And I saw what it was about. My jaw hit the floor again. And I said, oh my goodness, he has no idea what I've been working on and what it equals. It's incredible. So Sean sends that today in the forum. Remember, everything's happening at the forum. So in the forum, he posts that for us. And that was this morning. A couple days ago, Ivan is posting this. 2 or 3 days ago, Ivan's posting this. We've been talking about this 40 days. You see, we're looking at these 40 days. We're not just trying to understand the escape day. When it happens, the rest of it won't matter. We're trying to dig closer and get deeper and deeper into the Lord. We know it's the 70th year. We know it's coming. We should always be ready. There's no doubt about it. But as we're waiting and as we're staying prepared, we're seeking him deeper and deeper and in trying to understand where these things are and seek these things with the proper understanding of who the Gospels are speaking to, who many of these books in the timeline that they're speaking to is speaking about. The fact that it's truly 14 years. You'll see in some of these things, how is it that people are understanding that we're here, that it's going to be in this time frame of 2019, this time frame? How is it people are so confident in it when it's 13 to 14 years away before Christ returns? You see, their spirit still knows, even though they don't have the proper understanding. And you'll see what I mean when I'm talking about, how somebody could have known this time frame that we're going to show in a calculation that this guy had written a book about in 2013. Amazing stuff, amazing stuff. So hold on tight. So see, Ivan was here and he was talking about these different things as well. Just, sharing and trying to understand more of these things in relation to the 40 days, the escape time, when that 40 days would tie in, because we know we're at the doorstep. All right. We know we've been talking about how there's a 40 days connection that we said with Simeon, that 41st day when the Lord shows up wrapped in the swaddling clothing and boom, now he can die. Now he can go be with the Lord. You see, like we were saying earlier. Well, from there's another 40 days. And it's the 40 days we've been talking about that relates to once the bride is gone. There will be a 40 days where Luke 11, Jesus says, as Jonah was a sign unto the Ninevites, so shall the Son of Man be. Right? And he wasn't a sign. He walked in as Jonah was 40 days. The 40-day warning for Nineveh. So shall the Son of Man be. Remember this one here, this prophetic word that we talked about from 1993? And how the Lord showed up and these people were instantly changed, right? And all the ancients from Old Testament and New Testament that were the Lord's were there, and these people that were transformed, the people that hadn't been transformed can see the people that had been transformed still, and they look normal, but they knew something had happened, and they got the incredible powers, but they could see those ancient ones. Remember this whole 40-day thing and this time frame? And that what did this vision dream talk about? It also spoke about how when the 40 days came to an end, that group that had received those transformed bodies, those people that were instructing and informing the people for the 40 days, when the 40 days were over, they were going to be taken. Right? That's what he tells them. You're going to spend 40 days here on earth as I did after my resurrection. And we know that it relates to Luke 21 I think verse 9, when it says, or verse 12, but before all these, meaning before those seals, that portion begins, this is going to happen. What would cause that chaos in Luke chapter 21, verse 12 through 22? That chaos, and then Jerusalem towards the end of it saying it'd be surrounded, not attacked yet. What's causing that chaos time frame? The escape that happened. All right? And these people that have received these transformed bodies, these powers, they won't be killed or anything. But when the 40 days are over, they're taken. And when the 40 days are over, we know that Jesus had told them what? To those that would remain, 10 days and I will send you the promise of my Father, the Holy Ghost. And these people will receive these supernatural powers. The Acts chapter 2, that period of time when they were saving, it was so amazingly supernatural. And people will say, well, that power is still in the earth now. It is, but it certainly is not being manifested like it was back when the church was first starting. Why? All part of things that we're going to get into. Why? Because persecutions were coming. We'll show all these things as well. And that's the time of what? Smyrna. And then you're going to see it'll relate to how later on in the churches, when it gets to Philadelphia, they're the ones who are sent out as evangelists during the time of trumpets. All of these things we're going to cover today, guys. All of these things we're going to keep going into. It is so exciting. And like I said with Elise, she had sent me this. She had posted it in a comment maybe about a week ago. And, I was still thinking, well, okay. If it's trumpets, all right. It's trumpets. We're off by maybe 14 days in this count. I'm cool with it. If it's trumpets that Jesus was really born and not tabernacles, okay. But, there was something in me just 2-3 days ago that started saying, let me look into this a little bit more. And so I had her send me an email. I commented to her, said, send me an email with the info that you were talking about because I'm going down this rabbit hole. And so this was her response. And it was talking about Feast of Trumpets, September 11th, 3 BC. Okay? September 11th, 3 BC, talking about Dr. Michael Hesier. Many of you guys probably have heard of him, have seen of him. And it was also talking about Revelation chapter 12.com that I'm going to show you a clip of as well. And it's talking about how in the software programs that we can understand so much of what was going on in the sun, moon, and stars in the past and currently and what's coming in the future, which is all part of what we're talking about today. It's so incredible. Especially the fact that Sean sent this to us in the forum after I had completed what I completed last night. My jaw hit the floor and I was just like, man, I was already planning this portion with this portion of the Mayan calendar and what completed. And oh man, it was just talk about thank you, Lord. Thank you for just confirming and showing us this greater detail. But what it means is a lot sooner potentially. All right. So if we're not talking tabernacles anymore and we were talking that Feast of Trumpets, well, then we're no longer talking November 24th. We're talking, you'll find out soon. Okay. So they're saying how it was September 11th, 3 BC. And I kept thinking, man, this isn't making any sense because I was in Stellarium at 3 BC. And even when I told Elise, I was saying, it doesn't make sense. Everything would be off by 1 year. I mean, if it was really 3 BC, you'd make the calculation, everything's off by a year. And that's why you saw this little thing briefly. And you say, well, wait a second. Okay, well, 3 BC if we make the count. But then what happened is I watched the Heiser one, and I went to the revelation12.com. Okay? This one here. To the revelation12.com one, and he's talking about the September 11th, 3 BC, when Christ was born. That it was the Feast of Trumpets. And the reason they say it is because I'll show you the sign that was in the sky. Okay? But I want you to hear this first so that there's no confusion.
The key thing is that on Rosh Hashanah of 3 BC, and if you want to look at this, by the way, in Stellarium, you'll have to look at 2 BC because Stellarium uses year 0 incorrectly so. But you'll have to look at 2 BC in Stellarium if you want to see this. And the new moon was on September the 11th in 3 BC. And that.
All right, hear that? So on these other programs, they've got it correct, and they start in 3 BC. So for me, before I got to this point in this video and I had watched Michael's first, I went to Stellarium and I'm like, in 3 BC, what are these guys talking about? There is no conjunction of these things that they're saying. There is no conjunction that these magi would have known what they were looking at and understood these things. So you're thinking, man, what's going on? And then I get to this portion of his video when he explains that in Stellarium, it's 2 BC because of how Stellarium does their count. Okay? So it's 2 BC, September 11th. And what's the big deal? First of all, you have the moon under her feet, clothed in the sun. There's Mercury, Venus, Leo. And what do we have here? Jupiter and Regulus. Let me show you. What is the Star of Bethlehem? Okay? What is... You see, right here. So the Star of Bethlehem are found in events that took place in the skies 3 to 2 BC. You see, they even say 3 to 2 BC. Why? Because it depends on the software program and these events that were playing out as it was building to that point, which the Magi would have seen. Okay? So highlights include a triple conjunction of Jupiter. And what is Jupiter called? What is Jupiter called? The king planet, with the fixed star Regulus, which is called the king star, starting in September of 3 BC. 2 BC in Stellarium, the Star of Bethlehem right here. So what Elise was trying to show me was, look, I know you're thinking that it's tabernacles and it looks good. I mean, to me, even, I mean, how do we dispute the whole 8th day thing? However, I'm not stuck in my ways if I could be proven or shown other things. All right, how many times have we shown that, you guys sharing stuff? How many times have we made adjustments? There are things that we know. There's no doubt about that. But there's still some things that we're trying to understand. And I started going through all this and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, there it is. There it is. So if that's the case, when we were doing this calculation, pay attention, when we were doing this calculation based off of tabernacles, because why does this matter? Why does it matter? Remember what I said at the beginning? Simeon, right? Simeon, it was based on Christ's birth. 8 days and 33 days. By the time he showed up in the temple, and Simeon could now die. So if we were looking at that from tabernacles, we would now be off because we were basing it off of what? His birth. All right, his birth. So if his birth was trumpets, watch this. If his birth was trumpets, okay? And October 1st, 2019, trumpets, we add 41 days. 40 plus the 41st day when they came to the temple. And what do we get? Check this out. November 11th, 2019. Well, now think about this for a second, guys. Pause on just what that could mean right now. Jesus was born on our quote-unquote September, right? 11th, which would be what? 9/11. Okay? He was born on 9/11. We know what happened, September 9/11. Well, what else do we know about November? November, remember the Catholic Church, Rome, changed the calendar. Sorry, that beeping, that dinging that you're hearing is just because of the forum, because I have a couple forum pages open and I don't want to close one of them. But maybe I can close this one here. No, this one here. Sorry, where was I? I'll probably still get the ding. Okay, so we know that Rome changed the calendar names, right? That's why we have September 7, we have October 8, November 9, December 10, you see? Because the beginning of the year wasn't always until just like several hundred years ago, a few hundred years ago, it wasn't January. We talked about that before, right? The whole story of April 1st and how April Fools came about. We've talked about that story. So what was November? November was 9. And it equals what? That would be 9, November 9, right? 9/11. Well, what else is important about this? How many people have been hearing or seeing for decades 11/11? All right, if at the 11th month now, 11/11. People have been seeing and talking about 11/11 for years. And what was interesting is prior to all this, I had watched a video just a couple days ago from Jacob Israel, where he's talking about this 11/11, this November 11th time frame that he's looking at. I don't know that he fully understands why, except these events and some of these things that we're talking about here. And he wrote a book, 11/11, many years ago. So there's something significant as well about 11/11. Well, now remember, see, this is why I'm saying it's so important that if Christ was actually born on trumpets, now we're doing the calculation from trumpets. Okay? That's why it's important. So we get to November 11th. Well, from November 11th, remember we were talking about now, once that portion is done, we know there's the Luke 11, right? When now the Lord would be here. Not in all his glory that everybody would recognize him. He, as the Son of Man, would be here as Jonah was to Nineveh. He is going to be choosing those people, his disciples, those people who will be transformed to work during this 40 days. Just like that dream vision was talking about. I believe there's a lot of understanding in that dream vision that from 1993. You see, Luke 21:12. But before all these, before all what? The tribulation beginning. Before all these, they shall lay their hands on you, delivering up into prisons, into synagogues, and do not meditate what you're going to say before, the Holy Spirit will give you the words. Some of you shall be put to death. Right? But not a hair of your head will perish. And when you see Jerusalem compassed about, see, what is going on here? What caused this sudden change in the earth that now suddenly they're going to, boom, start laying their hands upon the Christians and persecuting them? What suddenly changed? Remember how it says, but before all these? So before all these, when we come down to Luke 36, or even 34 through 36, we know that this is the suddenly right here, that we won't be caught because we are watching and praying to be found accounted worthy. We will not be caught off guard with this suddenly. This is the escape. To the rest of the world, it's going to be a snare. So what we're looking at is the potential here that the event for November 9th month, 9/11 of this type and shadow could be the escape of the bride. And from that point, we know what has happened. Chaos. It'll be a snare upon them that dwell on the earth. Chaos will be wreaking havoc all throughout the earth because tens of millions of people will have vanished. And those that have been supernaturally filled and transformed to work during the 40 days while the Lord is there with them. Remember, just like that dream vision, and suddenly the Lord was there in the midst of them, which brings us also to Luke 24, right? The Lord, he suddenly shows up in the midst of them and says, at the beginning of the 40 days, right? And he tells them, whoa, it's okay, calm down, peace be with you. But they were terrified, right? This word terrified shows up twice. It's that same word for Luke 21, only shows up twice when it says, be not terrified. This commotion and chaos that started reigning, this is the escape. This is the beginning of the 40 days and saying these things must first come to pass. You see? Then there's going to be this stuff, but first we have a 40 days with me here in the midst of you. This is the stuff we've been talking about recently, right? So what does that mean? Well, from November 11th, let's go November 11th, 11/11, and we add 40 days for a total of 81 days since trumpets, takes us to where? December 21st. December 21st. Sorry, sip of coffee. December 21st. And I thought, wait a second. We've been talking about the Mayan calendar, how what we failed to understand back then, and people obviously realized a lot more later, was that the Mayan calendar wasn't saying it was the end of the world, but it was the end of an age. It was the end of a count, that a new beginning, their long count calendar. Okay? It also brings us to the winter solstice, but the 2012 phenomena on December 21st, phenomena was a range of astronomical around 2012. Okay, this is the next one I want. And here's what it was. There's a strong tradition of world ages in Maya literature, but the record was distorted, leaving several possibilities open to interpretation. According to that, a compilation of creation accounts of the Maya of the colonial area highlands, we are living in, according to them, we are living in the fourth world. The Pupo describes the gods first creating 3 failed worlds, followed by a successful fourth world in which humanity was placed. In the Maya long count, that was their calendar, the previous world ended after 13 Buktans, or roughly 5,125 years. The long count's zero date was set to a point in the past, marking the end of the third world and beginning of the current one, which corresponds to August 11th, 3114 BC. Okay, Gregorian calendar. This means that the fourth world reached the end of its 13 Bactan or Mayan date 13. Interesting that it was 13 as well. On December 21st, 2012. Okay, so what is it talking about? It was the end of a period of a long count calendar that they had for over 5,000 years. Now, why does this matter? Why was the whole world, pretty much anybody that had heard about it around the world, it was a huge deal? Do you think maybe because there was some significance to it? Oh, it got hyped up with the whole end of the world thing. But guess what? Do you understand the timing? What do we know we have? What do we know? We know the end times were what? 21 to 22 years. For those that are wondering, go watch this video. Watch this. It was the first one in the 6-part series. This one right here. Called The Final 21 Years and 22nd. There's a reason their calendar, their letters, the Hebrews, it's 22. Revelation has 22 chapters. It's 22. Why? Because the end of the age is 7, 7, 7, and the final Jubilee 22. Remember, we've talked about it many times. It's 7 times 7, right? And the 50th is the Jubilee. Well, all those other 7s are past. The end of the age is, which began in the end of 2012, was 7 starting. Then 7 of seals, then 7 of trumpets. So what did we have? What does it sound like? It sounds exactly and is just like Jacob and his wives. All right? What happened for Jacob? He said the first 7 years that he served, expecting to get Leah, expecting to get Rachel, but he got Leah. Those first 7 years, I say, were easy, right? I usually say easy, but he says they flew by because he loved her so much. You see, these first 7 years, these are precisely the 7 years we've been talking about. Precisely the same 7 years. The 7 easy years are in this midst of coming to an end right now. Then there's going to be this 40-day period and 14 years taking place. The story is also repeated in the story of the ark. You had 7 days or 7 years. Then they got in the ark and it was 40 days. Then you have the dove and the raven go out. The dove returns, the raven doesn't. The dove returns, waits 7 days, which is another 7 years. Goes out, it's the olive branch one. That's the rapture time. Then the dove goes out again, 7 more years, and doesn't return again. That's when the Lord will return once and for all, feet down on the Mount of Olives, and the millennial reign will begin. You see, it's the same story. 7, 7, and 7. 7, 7, and 7. Over and over and over. And here we are now today, and I'm showing you this calculation from a date we now know was the Feast of Trumpets birth of Christ. That equaled our 41 days we were looking for. That landed on a date that many believe is very significant and have for decades. From there, we know there's another 40 that relates to when the Lord will be here and we'll have these people working with him for those 40. When those 40 days are done, what happens? Oh, guys, you guys are going to love this. What happens when those 40 days are done? The Lord leaves just like he did at the 40 days at the end of Acts chapter 1. He leaves at the end of 40, and he tells those who have now been instructed, go to this upper chamber, go to this upper room, remain there until what? Until 10 days, right? Wait for 10 days. Wait until the promise of the Holy Ghost comes upon you. 10 days later. Okay? Oh, you're going to see. So when the Lord leaves, remember what he told them? Even just in this dream vision? What do we know? When he returns after the 40 days with those people that had the transformed bodies, what does he say? It's to the banquet. He's going to serve them. It's the wedding banquet. You following? Watch this. What do we have also after he gets Leah? First of all, what happens with Leah first? Right? He goes into the tent. You see, they consummate the marriage first. Then they have the banquet. Okay? Now, there's not a type and shadow of the 40 days in here. We've got it at the beginning of, over in the story of the ark. But in here, it's the focus of the 7, 7, and 7. But what do we have? They had to make a feast when? The first 7 years are past. There's a feast for the wedding. Right? He's so upset that he got her, and he was duped into getting Leah. But Laban tells him, look, fulfill her week, and then he's going to serve 7 other years for Rachel. What's this fulfill her week? It's the wedding banquet. It's the wedding banquet. It's the 7-day wedding banquet. You're going to see as we continue forward why this whole wedding banquet thing is much more important, or where its significance is found. Okay? Let me okay, so we're now at December 21st, okay? So that now takes us to December 21st. The escape possibly right in here. Okay, where are we today? We're right here. So this is a possibility. I still put this one out there in case it wasn't a trumpets thing. However, the sky speaks for itself. That's what the story is, right? So now what happens? Check this out. Where does it take us to? The 7-year anniversary. Remember, the Lord's been here for 40 days with those transformed people, with that chaos taking place, and some being put in prisons and some being killed during that 40 days. When that 40 days is over, what is it? 7 years have passed. 7 years have passed since the Maya, who understood, because why? The sun, moon, and stars. They understood the significance of looking up at the sun, moon, and stars way better than most of us here on earth do now. You see? Way more than we did. And it just so happens that this count at the end of the 40 days is the end of the 70 years, of the first 7 years from the Mayan count. And what happens next? 7 days to the 8th day of Hanukkah. Now, I never saw this significance with Hanukkah before. People have tried sharing it with me, but I couldn't see it as its significance to the escape. Well, guess what? We're not talking about the escape. The escape will have already happened. And maybe even in a worst case, maybe the escape is with everybody that had those transformed bodies, and it's right here. But I don't believe so based on what we understand from Simeon. But remember, we keep saying this, we are in the 70th year. We know it's sometime within less than 5 months. There's no question about it. Oh, and for those that don't understand, for those that are new that don't understand this 70 years that we're talking about, you are going to want to watch this video, vital to keep from sleeping. Israel is 70, proven once and for all. It's a fact. It's not a maybe, it's a fact. Okay? So here we are right here. Now, we can say, well, it depends which calendar God's using. You know, we have a 7-year here, the end of 7 years, and which is what? Now the beginning of the next 7 is about to begin, right? So that would be what? About an 8th day. But is God really, come on, he's using the Mayan calendar? No, that's not what we're saying. But did the Mayan know things because they were also looking up at the sun, moon, and stars and understanding their movements and knew that it was the end of an age, which was precisely what they had it as, the end of their long count calendar and the start of a new one? And it just so happens that this calculation in 2019, the year of the true 70th, at the escape of the bride with the end of 13 years when Christ returns in the 14th year, equals his 2,000 years from his feet down on the Mount of Olives as he left? Is it possible that there's a reason Jesus said in Luke chapter 9, which we also revealed, and it came to pass about an 8 days? Why about an 8 days? We know Mark says after 6. We know Matthew says after 6. We both know why Mark says it, and Matthew, because Mark is after 6 years of seals, then the rapture, and which is their transfiguration, their transformation. And we know after 6 years of trumpets, when the Lord returns feet down on the Mount of Olives, that is Matthew's time. So we recently were revealed the truth of the understanding of about an 8 days. Why on earth about? Why give or take in 8 days? Right? Is it possible the Lord has got this count on a Gentile and Hebrew calendar? Is there some sort of connection to it? Like counting from Luke 2, from his birth to the time of the potential escape, and then another 40 days to the 7 years on a Gentile long count calendar, right? Not Gregorian, but a Gentile one, just like everybody's not Jewish Gentile, the Mayan calendar. And guess what? When Jesus leaves, what does he tell them? 10 days. 10 days. Wait 10 days for the power of the Holy Spirit to come upon them, which would be the beginning of Acts chapter 2, right? Guess what? What's 10 days later? It equals the end of December. There's your 10 days. And 2020 is the beginning of the 8th day on the Gentile count. So on a Gregorian calendar, the 41 with the 40 plus the 10, do you know, doesn't equal this count again? Here's the thing. It's not like just saying, oh, this count equaled this count. You know, you can make those counts every year. Well, guess what? This count with the biblical numbers from Simeon of Christ's birth, with the biblical numbers of knowing the 40 days with Christ as Jonah, and with knowing the power of the Holy Spirit coming upon them 10 days later again to those that were instructed and left behind after he left. 10 more days from that. It never equals the end of a year again till 2038. Only this year for the next 19 years will it happen like this ever again. And you know what? I don't even think it's Hanukkah is calculated at the same place. It's just that number count equals the same thing. Actually, Hanukkah might be because the number count would be the same. So do you follow what I'm saying? What would this then be? Well, here was the end of their 7 years. Here's the end of this 7 years. Could that be one of the reasons why God told us, why Jesus told us about an 8th day? You see? Using Hebrew and Gentile calendars. Why? Because it's for everybody right now. It's for the whole earth. The bride is portioned from among all of the churches. There are overcomers in all of the churches. There's a group of overcomers from every church that will escape all these things. And then there will be the overcomers, the final overcomers, who will be the portion for rapture, and then, of course, the final overcomers for Judah. You see? So, I'm just saying, it seems like a possibility that what we're looking at is a count precisely from one of his calendars, or from the one calendar, equaling a significant calendar that the world had heard about, ending on a significant calendar that the Western world uses. You follow what I'm saying? Hebrew, Mayan, Gregorian. Out of all the mystical type calendars in the world, which one is out there that just about everybody on earth has heard about? The Mayan. You think maybe that was the reason of it being so big around the world? All right. The Lord using it maybe for people to pay attention, and the enemy using it to deceive and say it's destruction coming right away. You'll see why I'm talking about this, because there's a significance going on right here. Because remember, when the 40 days are over, after 40 days and nights, you will come with me into the skies above Jerusalem, and we will leave from here to have a celebration, a banquet in my Father's house, a feast that had been planned before the worlds were made. This stuff is awesome, guys. This stuff it's so incredible. I'm not a dreams vision guy, but when I can understand something in them, and I know it's a significance of something we've been studying, and I can see it, man, it gets exciting. So exciting. Okay? Watch this. So what is this relation then to Jesus' birth then at 3 BC? Okay? Jesus born at 3 BC at trumpets, like Luke chapter 2. Okay? Is Jesus 1 year old at 3 BC? No, he's just born. You see, it's part of that, it's all part of that talk we've had before, that you'll have 365 days in between before it gets to the 1. You know, and people will say, well, now you're in the third. Well, no. From 0 until you're 1, you're not 1 yet. All right? I talked about it too. There was I can't remember what movie it was, but she was in court, and the judge was saying, or the Inquisition that was going on, kind of like before Congress, and they said, okay, so you were with the company for 12 years. And she just said, she chimes in, she says, no, it was 10. And why did they do that? because of the way you count. 1, 2, 3, right? So when you just count them as individual single days for years, you can make that assumption that, okay, well, that's 12. But no, I got there at that second one. You see what I'm saying? 1 to 2, it's the same type of thing. And she chimes in and she says, no, it was 10. Okay? Same idea. This is where Jesus turns 1 in 2 BC. 1 BC, he turns 2. 1 AD, he turns 3. By 15 AD, he's 17 years old. Okay? 16 AD. By 28 AD, Jesus is now 30 years old. So where are we? This is trumpets. Jesus is 30 years old in the fall, right, at trumpets time of 28 AD. Where do we get this understanding? Well, check this out. Okay? Many of you guys know this part. Luke. All right, where are we? Luke 3, verse 23. And Jesus himself began to be, here it is again, about, come on, Bible. Lord, what are you doing to us, giving us all these abouts? You understand how many abouts have been uncovered here in this ministry in their relation to these times that we talk about? I mean, it's just unbelievable. Okay, so Jesus began to be. Okay, so he was now turning 30. He began to be, excuse me, about 30 years old. So what year would that have been? 28 AD. Now, what do we also know about Jesus? We know from the scriptures there's an account of 4 Passovers during his ministry. Okay? 4 Passovers. So if he turned about 30 here when he was baptized, that means in spring of 29, okay, spring of 29 AD, he observed 1 Passover. In the fall, he turned 31. In the spring of 30 AD, he observed his second Passover. In the fall, he turned 32. In the spring of 31 AD, he observed his third Passover. And in the fall, he turned 33. At 32 AD, we know this final Passover at about 33 years of age, because his birthday was at trumpets, making his about 30 to completing at 33 and a half approximately years of age at the 4th Passover. You see? He was, of course, crucified, died, and resurrected. What do we keep showing in this ministry? What is the truth? It's over. Jesus returns, feet down on the Mount of Olives at the end of the 6th trumpet. All right? At the end, where are we? At the end of the 6th trumpet. See, the second woe is past. That's the 6th trumpet. And what had happened? The 2 witnesses had died. They stood up after 3 days. Boof! Taken to heaven. Stood on their feet and taken to heaven. And in the same hour, there was a great earthquake. 1/10 of the city fell. And in the earthquake were slain 7,000 men. And the remnant were affrighted and gave glory to the God of heaven. Why did they do that? There would have been great earthquakes happening all over the place. Why this time did they give glory to the God of heaven? Because it was Yeshua returning, Messiah coming down, feet down on the Mount of Olives at the end of the 13th year. 7 years of seals, 6 years of trumpets have passed. He returns feet down on the Mount of Olives, and the 7th trumpet, just like the 7th seal is rest, the 7th trumpet is rest. Why? Because he has returned in the final year to confirm that covenant that he made at the beginning of trumpets. And see, The kingdoms of this world are become the kingdoms of our Lord and of his Christ, and he shall reign forever. And then, of course, there's something we don't get into much now, which is bowls and so forth, all right? You got the millennial reign, but our focus is to the end of trumpets. So you see, when does he come? You see, we say 2031. Remember the fall? Just like we say, where does it start? In the 70th year of Israel, in the fall, in the later portion of 2019. When does Jesus return? At the end of the 6th trumpet, which is at the end, see, from the fall of 2031 to the fall of 2032, Jesus returns feet down on the Mount of Olives. That final 7th year, which I was saying, is from the fall of 32 to the fall of 33, and it's what we call it's the 14th year, it's the 7th trumpet, the cleanup time, if you will. All right? What happens in the 15th year? Like we were saying earlier, right? The 15th year is really like saying the 22nd year. You'll see that if you watch that 21 and 22nd video. 7 easy years. You see this? 7 easy years. 7 Mayan years. 7 Jacob's years have passed. Then you got 7 of seals. That's 14. Then you got 7 of trumpets. That's 21. But you see, we just say these 7 easy ones have already passed, which is about to happen. And then we just say, okay, 7 of seals, 7 of trumpets for 14 years. And the 15th year is the Jubilee and the restoration of each tribe to their land. You follow? When? Birth at 3 BC equals death. Now, we're not making this up. This is in the sun, moon, and stars. Everybody knows, if they spend any time searching, that it was 2 BC / 3 BC. Because of why? Because it was the Star of Bethlehem. And you had the woman with the moon under her feet, clothed with the sun. You see, they already knew it. So from that, we can clearly determine when Christ was crucified. And what do we know? After 2 days or after 2,000 years. It's the story of creation. From his death and resurrection, 2,000 years. What does that equal? 2032. We've talked about it many times. People can say it's maybe they've messed with calendars, which they have. They've messed with these days and these months and these things like that. But there's one thing. I remember talking about this with Josie Wales, or commenting with Josie Wales a long time ago, saying that there's one thing they can't mess with. A year is a year is a year. You know when winter is past, and you know when spring, summer has come. You know when winters come, you know when summers come. You know when winters come, you know when summers come. They can't fool us on that. Okay? That can't be fooled with. So we know 2,000 years will be in 2032. And it said after 2 days. So it'll be what? After the Passover. He's not coming to fulfill the spring feasts. He will return feet down on the Mount of Olives at trumpets of 2032. Just like when he was born. Trumpets. You see? So how is it these people are looking at these time frames of now? And I'm not talking about those that are calling this date and then that date, and every time there's a feast or there's a weekend Hebrew celebration, everybody keeps talking about it. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about those that are paying attention, those that are watching maybe a little more closely, if you will. How is it that they're sensing this time frame as well? They don't even realize Israel's in the 70th. They have no understanding of the 13 and 14 to the 14 years. But their spirit inside, they have this sense, right? Check this out. Okay, this is the stuff we had just talked about. Okay? With the Gregorian sun and the moon calendar as well. Giving us an end time start count from the fall. All of this in the true 70 years of Israel being a nation. Especially for you new people, I'm just trying to really hammer home that, do you understand, in the true 70th, in the perfect count of the 13, 14 years, at the end of the 13th to the end of the 14th, right? Jesus will return at the end of 13, and in the final year is the final covenant year. Okay, we've talked about it many, many times. You'll see it in other videos you'll watch. You understand that there is no other time. You see how it even equals to that point that it equaled December 31st? Like he's waiting right to the very end. It's so amazing. Oh, shoot. I was just going to show something. Oh, yeah. Oh, we're not done. But I want to show you this playlist. I was talking about it in the last video. This one here has 8. But for those that are new, go to this one. This one's the newest one, okay? Just 3 days ago. Watch first to understand where we're at. Okay? It's got 5 videos in it instead of this 8. You can even watch this one if you want. There's a lot more. You can see the progress of what's taken place. But watch this one to get caught up. 5 videos should get you enough understanding if you take the time to study them to see where we're at and the truth that's in all the understanding of it. Okay? Now, get ready. Okay? Remember we said December 21st equaled that calculation when Yeshua would leave and he would take those transformed ones with him. That were the 40 days that were spoken about in Luke 21. Okay? Well, look what happens when he takes them. What does he say when he takes them? They're going to go to a banquet, right? Remember we were just showing that with Jacob after the 7 years. Here's Jesus. Here's the Hebrew count beginning. And here's a Mayan 7-year time count beginning. Here's the end of another 7. Well, what would begin after this time? Tribulation. You follow? Within a period after this is tribulation. And it will begin, Israel will be surrounded, and then they'll be attacked. Israel will not turn 71 years old without being surrounded and attacked. So Israel has till, at the latest, sometime in March, I would say. At the latest. I think it'll be January, but at the latest. Okay? So when Jesus leaves here, and he takes those people with him that he said he's taking to a banquet, an exciting, great banquet that was planned since the beginning of creation, look what comes next. A 7-day banquet time. Now, you want to see something freaky? Our brother Sean shared this with us just this morning. He just shared it. I think it was, maybe now it's a couple hours ago, but he just shared it. And when I saw this, I said, okay, end times in 2019. We've known about this for a while. We've been talking about, we know there's no other year. This is the year. And I see the end of the Mayan calendar and the countdown to Judgment Day. Well, now I got a little interested. I'm like, he has no idea that I was just correlating this because of the count. There was a connection to the Mayan calendar. And I thought, oh man, I'm going to check this out. So I'm going to close this now. So I go to check this out, and it's on the Rapture Puzzle website, YouTube channel. Now, take some of these things. You're going to see a couple pieces where he talks about, or where she's reading the excerpts of the book and talking about where he's talking about a pole shift. Do I believe there's necessarily a pole shift? I'm not going to say a pole shift is coming or the meteor strike is coming right away. But what was very, very interesting is this guy, David Montaigne, wrote this book, End Times in 2019, based on the Mayan calendar count. With what he had seen in the sun, moon, and stars, this book he wrote in 2013. Meaning he had the information at least sometime before that, before writing the book. And the whole time, so since before 2013, this was published in 2013, you're going to hear us say that, he's been focusing on this time frame of the bride at Hanukkah 2019. Right after I had been doing this count based on Christ actually being born at trumpets and not tabernacles. You see, what's going on? It's like the bride is being taken out of the way. Okay? The bride is being taken out of the way before this chaos. Just like any of us men would do with our bride to be. You know, we knew there was a tsunami and chaos coming. We would do everything we could to go and save her and put her aside in a safe place, wouldn't we? We might go back then and help other family, wouldn't we? But you want to make sure your bride is protected. Your bride to be is protected. I believe that's what's going on. Because this 40 days that will be very chaotic that will follow. And that 40 days we've known it's Yeshua there. And now he's leaving at this time, and it connects to the Mayan calendar. And it just so happens, we get this info, and this guy tells us it was Hanukkah where the wedding festival is revealed, and he knew this for 6, 7, 8 years. Watch this.
Entire book about the prophetic signs that line up.
And she's reading the excerpts from his book.
For December 2019, but a very condensed version of some of the main points is explained below. So, and then he goes on to explain some things. I want to read a little bit more. Down at the bottom it says, with modern astronomical software, we can calculate when events in the sky match descriptions of future skies given in Bible prophecy. Many clues point to major events the week of Hanukkah in December 2019. Matthew 22:2 says the kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who gave a wedding feast for his son. How do these seemingly unrelated facts come together to suggest the fulfillment of end-time Bible prophecy in December 2019, quite possibly in the form of a pole shift? In December 2019, during Hanukkah, all major steps in an ancient week-long Jewish wedding ceremony will be played out.
See that? In December, remember, everything she's reading was a book that he published in 2013. In December 2019, during Hanukkah, all major steps in an ancient week-long Jewish wedding ceremony will be played out. Played out where? In the sun, moon, and stars. He saw and understood it. And if you go there, she has a link to a website with his info. He's traveled and taken these tours and gone in pretty wild and amazing searches all throughout the earth to biblical sites about all of these things. So very, very interesting stuff. This guy must have a ton of info from his travels and what he's come across. But he came to discern that the wedding plays out in Hanukkah of 2019 in the sun, moon, and stars. And prior to getting this info on this guy in his book, last night it equaled December 21st, the 7 years, as in the first 7 years passing, as in Jacob, first 7 fast-passing, easy years for Jacob coming to an end, and fulfilling her marriage banquet week. And when the 40 days with Christ, from November 11th as the determined count, Jesus would leave with those who were working with him for 40 days to go celebrate a banquet where in my Father's house. Do you guys get it? Do you see why I was so excited I couldn't hold back anymore? Where is this wedding that he's talking about? It's in the heavens. The whole ceremony is played out.
Jewish wedding ceremony will be played out by the movements of the sun, moon, and planets in a heavenly wedding. The giving of the ring to the bride even matches to the minute the diamond ring effect of the total solar eclipse, which is at the right point in the ceremony while we're celebrating Christmas, and it will be visible at sunrise from Jerusalem, fulfilling Isaiah 13:10 very accurately. The sun will be dark when it rises. Lots more astronomical details and explanations of how they match prophetic visions and ancient Jewish wedding, and how Revelation's new heavens and a new earth are achieved through a pole shift are given in the book End Times and 2019.
Remember, we're not worrying too much about pole shift stuff.
And then a little bit more, it says, ancient prophets had visions of the future, including the future skies. Their detailed visions, along with modern astronomical software, tell us when their visions take place. Many point to 1 week in December 2019 when the skies match an alignment drawn by the ancient Maya exactly 7 years after the end of their long count calendar, and the movement of the sun, moon, and planets mimic all the major steps of an ancient Jewish wedding ceremony in the sky. Is the Lord coming for his bride in December 2019? So
Oh man. Oh man. I keep saying, get it? Do you get it? Do you get it? Whew. Deep breath. Deep breath. Deep breath. This is so awesome, guys. God is so good. Look at that. Is it really possible? You know, how many times do we have that conversation within our own minds, right? Maybe some of you on a daily basis. I know it's quite often with myself as well. You know, being the vessel that's being revealed and having this understanding of these books and of the true 14-year understanding, and you know, being able to piece this stuff together. I shake my head like, what is going on? Why? How do we get this? You know, how after thousands of years are we here chosen to understand at this time? Because you see, it's not just me. You guys are sharing stuff with me. The Spirit, it is Holy Spirit led. The Spirit doesn't give us everything all at once. We're rewarded as we diligently seek and are open to see these understandings and follow these trails. That's what's been happening here for the last 2 years. And there's just no denying it. For anybody that takes the time to, at least over the 200 and some odd videos, take the time to watch these 5 and then go search around for yourselves. You just can't deny what's happening here. And now here in the 70th year, at this late season in time, we're shown that the truth of when he was born, equaling 9/11. Is it possible? Is it possible, seriously? You know, because we're so close, it's just like, you know, and like I said, if it's not here, then maybe is this another possible one? Well, guess what? By this time frame, it doesn't matter anymore. It must be. At the latest. Do you realize this is when David Ben-Gurion, having been elected, first took office? This is the latest to when they turned 71. This is on the Gentile calendar. I think it works out to here or here. I think it's the 5th maybe on the Hebrew calendar. You understand? It says 70 years in Zechariah. These 70 years. That it says the 5th and the 7th month is not talked about after the 70 years. You realize, like we spoke about in the past, it doesn't have the 10th month spoken about in Zechariah chapter 7, which reveals the 14 years for Judah's portion. It says the 5th and 7th, doesn't say the 10th, yet there is a 10th month, 10th day, which relates to Tevet and the 7th of Tevet, the 10th of Tevet, the 7th of January, when they've been surrounded and attacked. That's why I believe it's coming at some point in January for Israel that had been surrounded being attacked. See, am I excited? And if it's this, in this incredibly descriptive calculation, inaccurate from biblical understanding numbers, I'm excited. But if it's not here, maybe it's here. But there's just less than a handful of months. But I'll tell you, wow. There's even a celestial wedding taking place in the sun, moon, and stars over the week of Hanukkah 2019. Wow. When he leaves, what's he doing? It's amazing. I'm going to have to save some other stuff for another video, but I'm one to... maybe I'll just save the other stuff for another video, like the rest of this here. Or maybe, you know what, maybe I'll just touch on it quickly. You know, we're 118. I won't take too long in it, because a lot of these things we've covered before. Essentially, all this here, we've just covered. All right, this count. You know, is it possible that God's using the Hebrew moon and the Gregorian sun and the stars as signs? You see, I wrote this yesterday before seeing this portion of Hanukkah that this guy understood 6-7 years prior. Okay, so is it possible God's using the moon in one count with the Gregorian sun on another and the stars for the signs for us to understand? Well, if you just were paying attention, it might seem so, and it could explain why he said about in 8 days, using a combination of the calendars to prove it out. Okay, trumpets beginning, we said that. We were just showing that brings us to the 11th. From November 11, we were showing those, we spoke about how Acts 15 with Simeon would then bring us to 11:11. Luke 21 is the 40 days, but before all these. The escape. Also talked about how, which we've shown in the past, how 1 Thessalonians 5:1, the sudden, as we touched on, is the same unawares from 21:34, and from Luke 21 verse 9 is that same time frame of the commotions and the terrified. The commotions, the escape of the bride, the terrified, the Lord in the midst of them. Okay? Bringing us to December 21st. Doesn't this ring a bell to the whole world, right? It is the anniversary, of course, of the Mayan time of change. 7 years have ended, and the beginning of the next 7 will start. Isn't that pretty crazy? Guys, I did this last night. Last night. No clue whatsoever about this guy and his book. And what follows those 7 years before the next 7 years begin? The 7 days of Jacob. Genesis 29. You see, I didn't have that portion in there because I didn't understand that portion with Hanukkah yet. You see, we had the Maya portion, but I didn't have that portion of Hanukkah for the 7-day feast, the 7-day wedding feast taking place, the whole ceremony. Hanukkah. But then I had the story of from Genesis 29, 7 easy years. You see? And then what happens now is also the time Jesus is carried up into heaven. His 40 days is over. Those chosen to work seals, the disciples and apostles, wait 10 days. And this 10 days takes us to what? I should have highlighted this too, but brings us to December 31st. The end of the 7 of the Gregorian sun and the start of the next. All counted from the Hebrew moon. Right? The Hebrew moon calendar start date. From Christ's birth at trumpets. And do you realize that all of this can only happen in 2019 with this exact count? And it's all happening in the 70th year of Israel? So what comes after all of this has taken place? Israel being surrounded and attacked, I believe sometime in January, but certainly by March, which will bring about the start of World War. All right? It will then be what? During 2020 to 2021, we have the breakout time of nation against nation, people against people, kingdom against kingdom. War will break out throughout the whole earth. It will start in Israel. But prior to it beginning all in Israel, we know that they will be attacked first. It doesn't, soon as Israel is attacked, we tend to think in things all at once. But Israel will be attacked. There'll be more things going on with Israel. Then Babylon, the leader, the general will come, and there'll be more that will build on that. And while this is going on, these other nations were already planning their attack against each other, knowing what's taken place in Israel, having seen it and so forth. Okay? So from 2020 into 2021, nation against nation, red horse rider time. Okay, at some point in 2020. 2021, 2022, we have famines will have already broken out because of the World War. Black horse rider time, right? You see, we've talked about this before, that the riders might go out quite quickly after each other, but they will have their effects, their greater effects will be in their specific time frame. And when some events end, other events will start, and some will overlap, some will end quickly, and so on and so forth. So the famines will begin relatively early, like very quickly. But when they really reach unbelievable levels will be at around this time in 2021 to 2022. Well, all the wars are still going on. But don't forget the disciples who are working during this time. Millions will come to be saved. This is one of the reasons the Lord is allowing this, to wake up the sleeping church. Major end of days devastations will bring so many to call on his name, plus through all the miracles of the disciples and others who will have given power, who are given power to do so. Okay, we're talking about Acts chapter 2, which will have started back here, right? Acts chapter 2 type of Holy Ghost power will be in the world again to a degree not seen since back in the beginning of the church. Then we get to 2022, 2023, the Antichrist, the beast of Revelation chapter 13, who will have already been in power and have had authority, but will now come forward. This is that fourth beast of Daniel chapter 7. Right? It's Revelation 13. It is the midpoint of seals time frame, midish time point of seals. And, well, here, I'll keep reading. But will now come forward and end the big wars, and will be given greater power and authority. This is his time when he will continue 42 months, right in here. That, right, you see, I've got him as the pale to horse time frame. It's going to be just before that pale horse rider. He's going to be given that power just before that time. And you'll see, okay? And here's where I have the asterisks. The Antichrist may actually be revealed or be brought forward in the spring of 2022, making it in the 2021-2022 timeframe. So in this timeframe here of famine, and the later portion of it in about the springtime of 2022, because remember, this goes from fall to fall. All of these go from fall to fall. So by about the spring of 2022, I believe he will be revealed. He will be the guy. But it will take a little bit of time getting all this stuff set up and the world hearing and so on and so forth and declaring that he's the one. But that's when he will stand up. He will have that, he will end some wars, right? The big wars taking place, okay? Which will bring the world by the fall of 2022, which is this time when it starts, by the fall of 2022, to the worship of the Antichrist, his mark, and the killing of Christians who refuse him. Okay? Pale horse rider time. By the fall of 2022 is when I see that beginning in these 14 years. I do believe the mark will be available before then, but will become mandatory at this point to buy or sell. Okay? In that fall of 2022 forward time frame. So prior to this, what we're saying is it's these wars and famines are taking place and there's bloodshed because the great sword of the second seal and so on and so forth. So we know it's going to be devastation. It will be against Christians, but it won't only be against Christians. All right? Because the whole world will be caught up in this chaos of the world war. Okay? The whole world will be caught up in it. But when the Antichrist comes forward, the Antichrist is going to be the one to be worshipped, who has ended the wars, who will end the famine. And if they take the mark, people will have healing powers probably in them as well. You see? And I'm going to show you something with this. So what is this time frame here? Okay? Well, now he's the authority. He's not just the authority. He's the one being called the Messiah. He'll be promoted by Jews in the like the Pharisee type. He'll be promoted by Rome. And the whole world will start to bow down to this guy and believe he's the one. But Christians, during this first 3-ish or so years, will have been going through a massive revival. Because why? Because incredible devastation and persecution brings massive revival. You follow? Brings massive revival. And what do we call those people during this period who are being killed? Right? Who are being martyred? They are the church of Smyrna. Okay, they're the church of Smyrna, We've talked about this before. It's the time of the church of Smyrna, the persecuted church. And we talked about how the church of Philadelphia, the 144,000, the church of Philadelphia, are the evangelizing ones who go out during the time of trumpets to evangelize the Jews who still hadn't understood Christ. You see? You're going to see this. Let me show you something right now, and then we'll come back on this. Listen to this video. We're just going to listen to a few minutes of the start, and then a couple minutes here a little bit further in. It's a very quick, this pastor is awesome. Very, very well educated, or I should say studied in the scriptures. This is somebody I would love to be able to reach with the understanding we have here, the 14 years and the books and so forth. It would be so awesome, but we'll see. First of all, what it's talking about is the persecution of the church. And I'm bringing this up for a reason, because it's what we're talking about here in this portion now. Okay? Listen to this.
Destroyed every building, killed every pastor, destroyed every known copy, complete copy of the Bible, so the Christians divided them up. Well, that takes us to what happened. And that's what really, most Christians just need a kind of like a connection. And basically the connection is between this. How do you go from James, the early church in Jerusalem that we read about, and Paul, and all of the, come on back.
That's a fancy whiteboard.
James and Paul, how do you get from that to the Roman Catholic Church? You read the New Testament epistles. You see the early church in Jerusalem. You see the church planting work of Paul. How do you get to what we have with Constantine legalizing Christianity and merging it? And basically that's why that tagline was, if you can't beat them, join them. Because during these persecutions, what happened is, from the early persecutions, the more they ramped them up and intensified them, the more people came to Christ. In fact, Tertullian, who is a legal expert and came to Christ, he coined the famous phrase, he was a Roman, that the blood of the saints is the seed of the church. In other words, he said, the more the blood was shed, the more the church grew from the ashes of the arena, from the horrific, if you've been in the news, the horrible prison riots and murders and deaths that was going on in Brazil. That is just a tiny picture of the horrors of the horrible martyrdom, cruel, animal-eaten Christians innocently in the arena for sport. But the more their blood was shed of true saints, it just burst forth into, by the 4th century, people were coming to Christ faster than they could kill him.
See that?
And what happened in Constantine, he was the emperor in 313 AD, and he was a very practical man, and he was seeing he was losing his legionnaires. Because the legionnaires that bound the Christians and threw them into the arena, the Christians that were bound and thrown off cliffs, which is what Trajan started, they would just tie them up, lead the town out, and say, renounce Christ, we'll cut you loose. Don't renounce Christ, we're pushing you over the cliff. Now imagine coming to Kalamazoo, legionnaires, tying up everybody on your block, bringing them to a cliff, say, renounce Christ or we're going to push you over. That's what they did systematically through the provinces. And those Roman hardened soldiers heard the words of those saints who, yes, it's fearful to die, but they had hope beyond death. And those Roman legionnaires gradually, through the collective testimony of so many martyrs, embraced Christ, to the point that Constantine says, I'm not going to have an army left if I don't do something. And so that's basically what precipitated this. Well, again, where we're fit into the apostolic age is the time from the crucifixion of Christ right here through John on Patmos. The martyrdom starts under the reign of Nero, and it goes all the way through the beginning.
Okay. Did you hear that? We tend to forget about these things, right? We live in this Western world, much of us here watching, and we forget. We know there's persecutions, that it's really bad around the world. But you understand, we are coming to a time when the Holy Spirit is going to be released like in Acts chapter 2 again upon those chosen to work during this season and time. And the persecution is going to begin right away. Right away. See, what were the disciples saying when they asked Jesus in relation to the discourses? Lord, tell us what will be the sign of thy coming. When will be this time when you're going to return? And he's telling them these things must come to pass. So these things that were taking place back in those days weren't the things that he was talking about. They were a portion of it, but there was a portion that was all directly scripturally relating to the end of days. You see, nation rising against nation. Is that what he was telling them back then? Is that what was happening during that persecution time in the churches? No. This is literally the end of days, nation rising against nation, Red Horse Rider, that he told them before Patmos, before 90 AD approximately, when John got the book of Revelation. Why were these Roman legionnaires? What was happening to them? Why were they being converted because of what people were saying? Settle it therefore in your hearts, not to meditate before what you shall answer. For I will give you a mouth speaking wisdom, which your adversaries shall not be able to gainsay nor resist. This is even during that 40-day portion, which will continue on into the seals. You go into Mark's discourse, you have the same thing. Do not think about what you're going to say, right? No thought beforehand what you shall speak, right? Neither do you premeditate by whatsoever shall be given in that hour that you speak, that speak you, for it is not you that speak, but the Holy Ghost. But we know in looking at this isn't talking about 200 AD or 300 AD. But it was a type and shadow for there. But what it's telling us is it's for the end. But we had a picture of it also because it did have a type of application back then. Do you see what's coming? Do we understand why it says in Mark, it'll be as it never was before? And then in Matthew, it's greater than that. As now to this time, it'll be as never was before. Because this time of persecution, when this really gets going with the Antichrist, they're going to be slaughtering them like crazy. There were maybe a few 100 million people on the earth at that time. Now we're like 8 billion. You understand the technology that's available to catch people, to track them. All of these things that have been building for decades in tracking and understanding everything about you. That persecution is coming again, but the Bible tells us this time worse. Okay? Now I want to show you this other part because it relates to what we were talking about regarding the churches. Okay? The churches, Ephesus through Laodicea, we know they were churches back in the day in Turkey, all right, Asia Minor, modern day Turkey. They were literal churches at the time, but we also know that they were also types and shadows of churches throughout the ages since Christ. Okay, you had the Ephesian time, you had the Smyrna time frame, and all of the churches in their time frames. There's Philadelphia time frame, and then the time frame we would be in now, which is the Laodicean church, the get rich and he wants you prosperous and everybody lovey-dovey and nobody studying the scriptures, right? That Laodicean lukewarm church that people still go to, that they should get out of, right? This is the period we're in right now. But watch what he says about these church period times.
Flowing in through the Middle Ages, the Thyatiran period, not only was this a local church, Smyrna, Pergamos, Thyatira, Sardis, Philadelphia, Laodicea, they were real churches, but they also fascinatingly portray the history of the church. If you remember Philadelphia, there's no condemnation to Philadelphia from Christ. There's also no condemnation to Smyrna. When you're suffering, so a key to having no condemnation from Christ is to be so bold that you're willing to suffer, and to be so bold you're willing to evangelize. Because evangelism is what Philadelphia was doing, and that parallels what we would call modern missions from 17...
So interesting. See that? Who is the suffering one? Smyrna is the suffering church. Smyrna is the one during this coming season that we've been talking about. That's going to be the ones suffering. They're going to be the ones that will be resurrected later. Those, the suffering that through martyrdom, that will be resurrected to dwell with him for 1,000 years. And Philadelphia later on, Philadelphia is the time, like Philip we keep showing, is Philadelphia. You know, we see him where we see him in Acts, and he's called one of the seven, and his daughters, 4 of them were virgins. He is the type and shadow of Philadelphia. They're going out to evangelize in the time of trumpets. All right? Very, very interesting. Such good studies and some pretty brief ones he has too. So I'll finish up with this as quick as I can to show you guys, okay? Here's your seals time. Here's your Antichrist pale horse rider time. Okay? Then we get to the under the altar time. So you see the persecutions had to have happened first and really, really be going. And in the 5th seal, there's not a judgment per se. It's those that were under the altar, right? And they're told to wait until the rest die as they have. The rest of the martyrs come in. Then we have 2024, 2025, which is the 6th seal. All right, Revelation 6, 12 through 17. Chaos raining down on the earth. All right, destruction like never before to this point in human history. And what is this that's being spoken about? Oh, here we are. In Mark chapter 13, listen to what it says. At the coming of the Son of Man. Mark 13, verse 24. But in those days, after that tribulation. After that tribulation. What is that tribulation being spoken about? It is the 6th seal. Chaos raining down from heaven. Meteors or whatever it is that's striking the earth. Right? Destruction like never before. That's why you see with the coming of the Son of Man will come after that tribulation, which is the 6th seal tribulation. And it'll be like nothing that was in human history to that point. You got to remember, guys, I'm not saying this to scare anybody, because everybody watching should be praying and repentant and seeking the Lord and drawing closer to him to be found accounted worthy, that we will escape all these things that shall come to pass and to stand before the Son of Man. but maybe in understanding and drawing closer and taking these things and copying them and downloading. You can download this video from the website once it's posted on the videos page. Super easy to do. Right click, pause, right click, download. This will be available for printout as well in the description box. Okay? And we can maybe leave these pieces of information for people. So at the end of the sixth seal, see, toward the end of it, who do we see coming? Him who sits on the throne and the Lamb. So that's why it said, after that destruction, or after that tribulation, the sixth seal, then who do they see coming? They see him who sits on the throne and the Lamb. They're coming on Zion, the mountain carved without hands. That's why in Revelation 14, it shows the Lamb standing on Zion, right? Standing on Zion with the 144,000. That's why Zechariah 8, which we know Zechariah is 14 chapters to the 14 years for the side of Judah to look at. And what do we see? Zechariah 8, the first year of trumpets. What do we see? The Lord has returned on Zion. It'll be called the holy mountain of the Lord. That's what's taking place in Zechariah 8, and shows them. And later in Zechariah, as you keep reading, it shows him now there and rebuilding about to begin. Okay, this is also the end time frame of the Ezekiel 39 war. When the Lord's returning, it'll be when they see this coming, they're not going to understand what it is. They will end other wars and other fighting that they were still doing amongst themselves, and they will gather to come together to fight against this mountain, and the Lord will destroy them. Which is why when this is over, this Ezekiel 39 war, you see them, they're burning weapons, it says, for the next 7 years. Well, why would they be burning weapons for 7 years of millennium? They're not. They'll be burning weapons for the 7 years of trumpets. Then we come to 2025, 26, remember, fall to fall. And we have the 7th year. During about the first half of the year, we have the 144,000 who are sealed first. Then we have the rapture of the great multitude, which we see in Revelation chapter 7. After the 6th seal, right? The 7th seal isn't until chapter 8. So chapter 7 is what? It's the first about half a year. 144,000 sealed, rapture of the great multitude, as we read. This will end, and this time frame will end the time frame of the Gentiles. The time of the Gentiles will now come to an end. It is over. Then comes the 7th seal, which we see in Revelation chapter 8, which is a period called about half an hour. You see, so it's about half an hour, which is a type and shadow of about a year, because he's seeing from heaven, meaning the first half of the year was what was taking place here in chapter 7. Chapter 7 with the 7th seal equal the 7th year of rest. Okay, so we call it about 6 months for the 7th seal. Why? Because about the first portion with the 144,000 in the rapture. This half will be quiet, no wars or any destruction. Revelation 14:1, the Lamb now on Zion with the 144,000. Okay, they're about to go out and do their work now in trumpets. 2026, 2027, fall to fall, we have the beginning of trumpets. The Lord is on Mount Zion, Zechariah chapter 8. Jerusalem will now start rebuilding the city and the streets, which we also read in Zechariah chapter 8, and we read in Daniel 9:25. And the temple, as we read again in Zechariah chapter 8, will begin and continue for 3.5 years, while in protection, protection is surrounding the land, the flame of the Lord, if you will, right? The first trumpet will sound, bring a third of the earth, and the next three, burning a third of the earth, and the next three will happen over the course of 3.5 years. Not necessarily like we were saying earlier, the next one, like one, and then a year later, the next one, and then a year later, the next one. They might all happen pretty closely together, but that time frame will be over a period of about 3.5 years. Okay, which is what we're talking about here. And also the 144,000 are now being sent out. You have the second trumpet, you have the third trumpet, and what's taken place during this time? They're still rebuilding Jerusalem, the city and streets, the wall, and the 144,000 are out evangelizing during that first half of trumpets. When we get to the fall of 29 to the fall of 30, the first four trumpets are done by the spring of 2030. Okay, so the spring of 2030. So if we were fall of 29 to fall of 2030, it's in this earlier portion. In the spring of 2030, the last of the four trumpets will have been completed. Okay, which the fourth one was the sun, the moon, and the stars being smitten. The third of the day and night now being darkened. What will begin in this same year, around this same time, is now called the woe, woe, woe to the people on the earth, that we read in Revelation 8, chapter 13. Okay, the first four trumpets and the next three trumpets are woe, woe, woe. With the first woe being the first trumpet, starting about spring of 2030, when Satan and his angels have been cast out of heaven, having lost his battle against Michael and his angels, Revelation 9:1, Revelation 12:7 through 9, and Zechariah 11:1 through 3 that we talked about before, the vintage of old now coming down. So this time is all taking place through to the end of this 31 time frame, okay? Because it started in the middle of this one with Satan being cast out. Because we know Satan, his time will be 2.5 years. Okay? We talked about that before. So also, right before the first woe begins, Messiah will be cut off but not for himself. Daniel 9:26. So this is going to put us at about a 10.5 year mark, right? In the spring of 2030. Isn't that fitting? From where we are right now to the spring of 2030 is 10.5 years. Right? It's the exact same time as when Messiah will cut himself off. And those that were with him will fly away on the wings of an eagle, Revelation 12:14. It's also Psalms 90 and 10, remember? From 70 years to 80 years, and then soon. So you got 10 years there of tribulation, of seals and trumpets. And then you've got a period that says soon. It's a short period of time. We say is about 6 months. Okay? And it just so happens it brings us to what? 10.5 years right here in the calculation from where? The fall of 2019. They will remain. So those who fly away on the wings of an eagle, Judah, those that were with the Lord in Zion, they will fly away on the wings of an eagle, and they will remain away for the full final 3.5 years, or time, comma, and times, comma, and half a time, meaning they will not return until the end of the seventh trumpet, which is also the end of 14 years. At this time, around spring of 2030, the two witnesses will have finished their 1260 days of testimony, and Satan will make war against them for the next 2.5 years. Revelation 11, verse 7, when it says he's going to now make war against them. And after having chased Judah away with a flood, which is Revelation 12:14 through 17, and Daniel 9:26, they will destroy the city and the sanctuary and go after them with a flood and make war against them. All saying the same thing, these verses in these chapters. The 2.5 years of Satan making war against them is also called time, comma, times, comma, and a half. You see, we talked about this many times. There's no and here, because it's not 1 plus 2 plus a half for 3.5 like over here was. This one is 1, 2 plus a half, 2.5 years in Daniel 12 verse 7. That's how long this time will last See, it was when he was asking, how long will it last? So Messiah is now cut off. Satan is cast down. This will begin a time of devastation that has never been seen nor will ever be seen again. And this time will last for 2.5 years. That is the Matthew portion. When Matthew says, it'll be a time like never before in history. It'll be worse than that portion of time that Mark was, which hadn't been seen to such a devastating level on a world scale to that time. Now in this one, Satan himself is cast out of heaven, having lost his battle with his angels against Michael and his, and will be cast to the earth. Do you understand? This isn't anything for us to fear, guys. This is 10.5 years from now when this begins. The time of the Gentiles will have been way over. Now, is it possible that Gentiles will still be here? Darn right it is. There's going to be a whole bunch of Gentiles still here. Hundreds of millions and billions of people will either have been escaped, killed, or raptured before this time. How many people would be left by the time of trumpets even beginning? I don't know, half the population of the world at most? Yep. Remember, this is just overview stuff. This isn't going into all the nitty-gritty as we've done in so many others. This is to give you guys something to be able to share with people. All right? We're almost done. By 2031 into 2032, the second woe trumpet. Okay? The second woe, the sixth trumpet. And war is still going on against the two witnesses, remember? It's 2.5 years. So war is still going on against the two witnesses. Sorry, one sec. There we go. It's still going on against two witnesses. When the war against them ends, they will have been killed. And after 3.5 days, their dead bodies will be resurrected. And it will be right at the end of the sixth trumpet, like we showed earlier. All right, right at the end of the sixth trumpet. In the final hour of the sixth trumpet, there will be a great earthquake. It will be Messiah's return, feet down on the Mount of Olives, in the fall of 2032. Revelation 11:13, Zechariah 14, verse 4, ending the sixth trumpet and the 2.5 years of war against the two witnesses. At this point, the 7 years of seals and 6 years of trumpets will have come to an end. I was going to show you. Will have come to an end. 7 years of seals, 6 years of trumpets will have come to an end. Where were we? Two witnesses will have come to an end. And the King of Kings will have returned will have returned as he left after 2 days or 2,000 years, as we read in Hosea 6, 1 through 2, and Genesis 1 in the understanding of the creation story. 6,000 of work, and the 7,000th is rest. We did a video on that where you had creation was one day to the Lord, but to us, if we were here, it would have been as 1,000 years. Okay, that's the whole type and shadow of it. So it was 6,000 of creation, the 7,000th rest. Then we had 6,000 of man, right? 7 have passed. 6,000. What do you have? 7 years of seals, 6 years of trumpets, 7,000 years from creation. Then we had man's time of 6,000 years to when the Lord returns, feet down on the Mount of Olives. The end of 13 years, the end of 13,000 years. He'll fulfill that 14th year, and it'll be that 14,000th year, and the end of the 7, and then it'll be eternity beginning. You see? It's the same type and shadow. That's why the Lord must return after 2 days. After 2 days is 2032. It is the fall of 2032. No mystery. You understand? You understand how vital this information is? How these are mysteries since the creation? that were being prepared for us to understand and to get out this teaching, the truth of it to the world? 2 Peter 3 verse 8. Be not ignorant of this. One day is with the Lord as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years as a day. Just like we were just talking about. Well, when we're with the Lord, when they're with the Lord during the millennial reign, what is it going to feel like to the people during the millennial reign that are with the Lord, living with them there? It'll feel as a day. You can say a year. But to those outside, it'll be like 1,000 years. You see? And what will it equal from the 13,013th year to the 14th year to the 14,000th ending? Incredible stuff. End of 13 years and 14th year is a covenant year. Right? We were talking about that with Jacob as well. See? Genesis 16, 17, and 21. Abraham's first son, Ishmael, at 86 years old, right? When Abraham had his first son. Then God made a covenant with him 13 years later when he was 99 years old and Ishmael was 13 years old. Right? The promise came in the 14th year. Like Jesus at Abraham when he was 100. Or how about Daniel 9:27? A covenant confirmed in the final week after 13 years. Same as saying end of 20 years for Jacob, like we were talking about, having worked 7 easy or fast passing years, then 7 years for his next wife, then 6 more years for the cattle, and made a covenant with his father-in-law after 20 years. If you get rid of those easy ones, which we're talking about, like the Mayan 7 coming up, and we get to those 7 of seals and 6 of trumpets, and the 7th one is rest of trumpets with the Lord here, it's the same thing in the 20 years. 7 easy plus 7 and 6, or 13 and covenant. Genesis 29, 31, 44. In the year 32, in the fall of 32, when the Lord is returned to the fall of 33, it is the final year. It is the 14th year. The Lord has returned. The kingdoms of this world are become the kingdoms of our Lord and of his Christ, and he shall reign forever. Revelation 11:15. The mystery of God should be finished. Revelation 10 verse 7. And I am with you always until the end of the world. Matthew 28 verse 20. By the fall of 2033, the cleanup is done, the 14 years end, and the millennial reign begins. The fall of 33 to the fall of 34, that 15th year, right, is the Jubilee year. The 15th year, also the 22nd, like we've showed. They've now returned from the wilderness. Remember, we said they will remain until the end of the 14 years. Those that were with Judah that flew on the wings of an eagle into the wilderness, they have now returned from the wilderness where they were being protected and fed for the final 3.5 years. And now all tribes will be restored to their lands. Ezekiel 48. I did this last night. Didn't take the whole day. Because guys, it's at the tip. I don't need the scriptures anymore. You understand how crazy this is? I've only been doing this for about 2 years. Prior to that, I never, almost barely ever picked up a Bible except to look at something Chuck Missler said or Perry Stone had said, and just made a couple highlights like people in church. That was it. Look at this. Show this to people and try to have them prove to you that it's not 14 years. 2 sets of 7. That it wasn't from 3 BC and then it equaled 32, and it just so happens from this year fall it equals 13 to 14 from 2032 to 2033. It's impossible. And we're in the 70th year. Are you excited, guys? Are you excited? I'm excited. I know you're excited because I know you see it. I know you get it. We understand what's going on. We've been following this now for 2 years, building and building and building and building and building. And look at what it equals. The wedding in the sky. I love it, guys. I love you guys. I'm praying for you daily. I pray the power of the Holy Spirit, the revelation of the understanding and the truth for everybody that watches. Guys, share it, share it, share it. Time is running out. I love you guys. God bless you. We'll talk to you soon. Bye for now.